Could we please have a very warm round of applause for His Excellency Husam Zomlot.
Hello, good afternoon. It is indeed an honor to be speaking with you today. And it is always a pleasure to be back in the wonderful city of Cambridge and indeed addressing the renowned Cambridge Union Society. I'm one of the lucky ones who have taken this platform several times, including a few months ago. And thank you for arranging the weather. What a beautiful, warm day. Maybe that explains that almost everybody is picnicking today. And I would have done the same, sit in the sun as opposed to be sitting in a closed room. But I must warn that I am personally under the weather, so excuse my voice. It might crack as I speak. And also let me start by thanking Sammy MacDonald and Ivan Alexei Empire and the other team here at the Cambridge Union for extending an invite at this most crucial junction for Palestine, for the region and the rest of the world. I cannot emphasize enough what is at stake in Palestine today. There's nothing more and nothing less than the entire global order. But I have said this so many times that what is at stake in Palestine today is nothing more and nothing less than the entire global rules-based order. This is not the first time we say such a thing. I said it even a few months ago here at this very room, and a few hours ago on the BBC and Sky. We have been saying for decades that to ignore Israel's violations of international law, to ignore Israel's unlawful occupation and its attendant apartheid system of rule, and to ignore Israel's ideological extremism is to send a very clear signal that international law and international human rights law do not apply to all equally. It is to encourage criminality. If law is not implemented equally, it is no law at all. This is not hard to understand. To have to point out the absolutely obvious, time and time again, that Israel is committing war crimes after war crimes, that genocidal aggression must be prevented to start with, and must be met with serious consequences. That resolution can be found very quickly, just by honoring international law. Explaining all that time and time again is tiring. It is tiring, it is exhausting. Frankly, I'm done explaining when we hear senior politicians here in the UK and elsewhere have difficulty denouncing the imposed starvation on an entire population. I mean, children have starved to death because Israel has blocked humanitarian aid. Children have frozen to death because Israel has destroyed 2/3 of Gaza's housing stock and blocked supplies of fuel and electricity. On Tuesday, when Israel unilaterally shredded the ceasefire agreement it had signed, out of more than 400 victims in a single night's bombardment, indiscriminate, 174 were children, according to Defense for Children International. Women and children have been the most numerous victims of Israel's unhinged aggression, as per every single international source. And let's not forget the men, if somehow they don't count, as if somehow they don't count. They do. Men like Ahmed Zaharna, a 33-year-old nurse, who after a particularly long shift at the Gaza European hospital went back to his tent and never woke up. He was found on the 27th of December, frozen to death. All of this has happened, is happening in full view of the world. In the 21st century, what's so hard to understand here? What is so hard to understand here? How does the killing of 174 children in a single night of bombardment cause any kind of conceptual difficulty? What is difficult to understand? It's a war crime, plain and simple. It's a war crime to deny food, water, medicine, electricity, and fuel to an entire civilian population. And it is abhorrent to deny these war crimes and crimes against humanity. When Israel's defense minister tells Palestinians in Gaza, as he did only yesterday, that they will bear the full cost, he said, of Israel's renewed aggression, which will bring total ruin, he said, total ruin. That is an expression of intent to commit genocide. This is not complicated, my friends. I keep asking myself, why? Why? Why, given the entire world has agreed, at least since the 80s, that Palestinian statehood is the way forward to resolve this issue? Why are we still here? Why are we where we are today? Why, given the very clear laws and rights that apply in this case, are they not enforced? Why do senior politicians and leaders from Israel's Western allies tie themselves in conceptual knots, trying to defend the indefensible? Are they not just a little embarrassed? I can think of 3 reasons, all interlinked, of why where we are today, why we are here at this very acute, dangerous moment. These 3 reasons are, number 1, the dehumanization of the Palestinian people. Number 2, the ethno-religious supremacy. And number 3 is the false equivalence, the two-sidism. First is dehumanization, particularly in mainstream media. Somehow, we are just not quite human. We are children of a lesser God, less deserving of the intimate and human, or I should have said humane, portraits granted to others. Palestinian suffering is regularly downplayed or worse, erased. When Palestinian civilians are killed or wounded in Israeli airstrikes, we hear of casualties rather than victims. We hear a lot about Israeli hostages, rightly so, but very little about Palestinian detainees, which mainstream media tend to refer to as prisoners, as if they are criminals and as if they have undergone some transparent judicial procedure. They haven't. They have not. They have been tried in military courts, martial law, with secret evidence, with no right of representation, with huge discretionary powers to military judges. That is if they have been tried at all. Israel adopted the practice of administrative detention, allowing them, the Israeli authorities, to hold Palestinian detainees without trial or even charge indefinitely, that is in theory. They can renew it and renew it without having to present any charge. Palestinian detainees, according to the UN, are suffering sexual abuse in detention so severe that, and I quote the UN report only a few days ago, It is, the report says, more than a human can bear. Do we learn this from mainstream media? Have you heard this, read this in mainstream media? Did the mainstream media actually report it on a UN report? Not on what this person says or that person says, but on a UN commission of inquiry. Where are the profiles of all these victims? Where are the outraged columns? Or we are just mere numbers? The 174 children slain 2 nights ago are names, faces, dreams, passion, plans, parents, siblings, friends. Where are the calls on the British government to take action against something so clearly in breach of the laws of war, human rights law, and simple common decency? Witness the readiness with which the media in this country adopted the baseless accusations of beheaded babies and the systematic use of rape as a weapon of war with no checks. Just no checks. No skepticism. No homework. And you know, that can only happen if you are already primed to believe the worst. It can only happen when you are primed to believe the worst. In your subconscious, you can easily believe that the Palestinians can do that. So you don't check. You just publish on headlines, if you remember, 15, 16 months ago. So my friends and scholars, students, I believe the second reason it is so hard to break through to Western officials is more sinister because it comes down to ethno-religious supremacy. Ethno-religious supremacy and colonial legacy, colonial racism. And note, please, I talk about officials here, not people. I talk about politicians, not the masses in any side. It is clear to me that despite the deeply unfair hearing we are given in mainstream media, most ordinary people in the UK, most ordinary Britons are very and increasingly, growingly sympathetic to our struggle. That's obvious, that's clear. But the ethno-religious supremacy comes from the elites, establishments, comes from Israel, which since its founding has made very clear that only Jewish claims to the land of Palestine are legitimate. Justifications for this exclusivist claim come in two forms. But both suppose more rights for one set of people over another. One is drawn from religion and the idea of a chosen people on a promised land, very neatly echoing the pre-Israel Zionist marketing campaign of a people without a land for a land without a people. Another justification is that following centuries of European anti-Semitism that culminated in the horrors of the Holocaust, the most heinous crime in modern history, long after the advent of Zionism, I might add, Israel was seen as necessary for protection. I suspect most Western Europeans, politicians I mean, Western politicians, at least in Europe, would subscribe to this perspective and believe it to be honorable. The problem here, of course, is this also entirely excludes any role for or considerations of the rights of the people native to the land who had to pay the price. The Zionist project, which started in the late 19th century, was to establish a Jewish state in a place where only a tiny minority were Jews or Jewish. In order for Israel to become a majority Jewish state, this, of course, necessitated cleansing the land of its native population, ethnic cleansing, which duly followed in 1948 when some 2/3 of the indigenous Palestinian population was ejected by force from their homes and lands. My parents and grandparents were among them. And that's why I was born in a refugee camp in Gaza. None of us were or are allowed to return. Indeed, Israel even created a law to legalize the confiscation, theft of our homes, our lands, our orchards, and our possessions. The colonial racism, my friends, meanwhile, that legacy has extended itself in Palestine. It didn't end. It was apparent from the 1917 British Balfour Declaration, in which the Palestinian people were simply dismissed. Dismissed. 1917. Cancelled, if you may, as merely the non-Jewish community. Why I call it colonial racism? Because it is the kind that divides the world into civilized and savage. A world, I might add, that ought to have ended with the post-World War II order and the adoption in 1948 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Today, we do see variations of this ethno-religious supremacy. Some are crass and obviously racist, like Israel's finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, is quite clearly a racial supremacist and has proposed that Israel must annex all occupied territory. Palestinians will be tolerated as second-class citizens at most, he propagates. They will be encouraged to migrate, and anyone unwilling to play along will be dealt with by the military, he writes. So 3 options. Either you accept the status quo, i.e. under subjugation, oppression, occupation, etc. B, you leave. C, you are killed. These are the 3 options. And guess what? Mr. Smotrich is effectively the landlord of the occupied West Bank. He's not just the finance minister, he has a ministerial role in the Ministry of Defense, and in that role he's in charge of the West Bank. And some are pseudo-religious. U.S. Speaker of the House of Representatives has described support for Israel as a biblical admonition. I suspect he speaks of a large number of American evangelists who see in the creation of Israel a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and not one favorable, that prophecy, not favorable to anybody. It's not even favorable to the Jewish people. And I'm not going to expand on that prophecy by some segments of the evangelical movement. But all arguments from this perspective reach the same end result: the erasure of the Palestinian people, our history, our rights, and our humanity. So, my friends, there is also the third aspect, the false equivalence. This is the kind of equivalence that presents Israel's genocidal aggression on Gaza as a war, as if 2 standing armies are facing off against each other. This is a deeply distorted description of the reality. Let me just be clear, Palestinians do not have an army. We don't have an army. We have no missile defense shields, we have no air force, we have no navy, and we have no tanks or helicopters. We don't even have shelters for our children and families, civilians, to take shelter in. Israel, a nuclear state with one of the most powerful militaries in the world, occupies a territory with a people who are subjugated to constant oppression, violence, and systematic discrimination. To present it in any other way is imprecise, and irresponsible. It is irresponsible because it suggests equality where none exists. It suggests parity, symmetry where none exists. It makes it easy for Israel to present its actions as self-defense, even though it is Israel that is occupying Palestine and Palestinian land. It is Israel that has bombed 6 countries in the region over the past year and a half. And it is Israel that has recently expanded its occupation and military presence both in Lebanon and Syria. So false equivalence ignores the profound imbalance of power and the matrix of suffocating control over Palestinian lives that Israel exerts. It ignores the very basic facts of who is oppressor and who is oppressed. So my friends, if you look at the situation, follow it, read about it, delve in it, you will find out there is only one reason why Israel is building settlements. That is to make permanent what is supposed to be temporary. Israel's military occupation. That should be temporary, should have ended long ago. Israel's government, from Netanyahu on down, has been very clear that it will never allow a Palestinian state to emerge and that it considers all occupied Palestinian territory as Israel's and Israel's alone. That is the openly stated Israeli policy. It is in every clear contradiction to what global consensus on Palestine demands, namely the establishment of the State of Palestine on the territory occupied by Israel in 1967. It is in every clear contradiction to the fundamental rejection in international law of acquiring territory by force. The premise, those of you who study international law would know that the premise of the post-World War II rules-based order, the heart of it, is the inadmissibility of acquiring land by force. That's the heart of it. The International Court of Justice, the highest world court, has deemed the occupation unlawful only last year, July, and called for it to end at the earliest possible time. Under international law, my friends, settlements are unequivocally illegal. Indeed, they are considered war crimes. The International Criminal Court, meanwhile, has issued arrest warrants for senior Israeli leaders, including Netanyahu, who is accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Yet still the arms flow, still the trade continues, still the UK and other countries describe Israel as an ally and provides military and material support and political, legal, and diplomatic cover. Why? It's not as if there isn't an alternative, as if this is the only path we have, as if this is fait accompli and we are destined for this criminal, illegal situation. Just this month, Arab countries in an Arab summit issued yet another peace plan, this one echoing the 2002 Saudi peace plan, which then became also the Arab Peace Initiative, but with an added component this time for rebuilding Gaza and for the region's willingness to rebuild what was destroyed, bring back lives and livelihoods. It is a very serious, comprehensive, and pragmatic plan that falls entirely in line with international law and demands a clear path to the creation of a fully sovereign Palestinian state on all occupied territory that began in 1967. It is accepted by all Arab states and all Muslim states, and now it has been accepted by major European powers, including the UK. And remember, my friends, over 75% of all UN member states have already recognized the State of Palestine on 1967 borders. Why not the UK? Why is it so difficult for Israel's Western supporters to uphold international law when it comes to Israel? Because if Israel's Western friends should be so minded, the path ahead is very clear and rather simple. Very simple. First, if we really want to change the dynamics and tread a different path, lead a different path, number one, we need to impose sanctions, not only on individual settlers, but on the entire settlement regime and the state that sponsors it. Israel should be no exception. Should not be above any rule. Number two, impose a comprehensive arms embargo, not a partial one, as the UK did. You cannot be half committed to law. You're either full committed or not. Third, recognize the State of Palestine. Recognition is not a gift or a favor, my friends. Self-determination is a fundamental right of the Palestinian people. That way, there will be serious legal and effective pressure on Israel to do what it should have done long ago, decades ago, end the occupation and sit down seriously to address other main issues like our right of return. We are not asking to be treated as an exception. We are simply asking to be treated fairly. Is that too much to ask, distinguished audience and scholars, students of politics and of philosophy and of law? As we see attempts to silence voices of dissent across the world, and we are aware of what is happening around campuses, as we see attempts to stifle opposition and narrow avenues for protest in public spaces and on campuses. And I must say we have followed with inspiration what was taking place here in Cambridge over the last couple of years, actually. And we have followed the incumbent, the activism, the support. And we commend you, and we commend the student movement everywhere, in the US and here, for that historic movement you have created and led. As we see governments ignore international law and ignore their own responsibilities for the sake of Israel, and understand that our struggle is not just about us, it is about all of us. It is about the kind of world we want to live in, the kind of world we want our children to grow up in, and the kind of world you, the leaders of tomorrow, will inherit. We can do much better, I assure you. We can do much better. We must do much better. And I am positive that you will do much better. Your generation will do much better. So thank you. Thank you very much.